We've been spending a few weeks, and we're going to finish the rest of the summer, taking some time looking at some Psalms in the Old Testament. Some Old Testament Psalms. Last 2 weeks we looked at two that King David wrote. This afternoon, I'm thinking tonight, Bible school. This morning, we're going to be looking at one that somebody else authored. But before we get into the Psalm, I just want to talk about or share the fact that for most of us, sometime or another within our life, we may get depressed. I think it's part of the human course of walking in life that we sort of have the peaks and the valleys within our lives. When I got back from Air Guard this morning, it's my drill weekend, so I came in about 10 after 9, and I jumped and checked my email real quick, and my sister, who lives in D.C., her husband is a Navy chaplain. I didn't hear about this yesterday. I guess a Chinook went down in Afghanistan with quite a few people on board, and he's being asked, he's got to go to Dover today to be ready tomorrow when the individuals that have passed away start to come. Just read that little email, and it hit me. How many lives, how many families, husbands or wives, fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, have been instantly changed? They're going to be in depression. There's going to be struggle that's going to be going on there. We got done with work yesterday afternoon at 6 o'clock, and I got one of my co-workers, one of my enlisted, got a phone call from the other enlisted who was with another enlisted young gal, 25 years old. She found out yesterday afternoon that one of her best friends, Friday night, Saturday morning, 3 o'clock, up in Grand Rapids area, fallen off a motorcycle and got hit by the van behind. That family forever changed. This young 25-year-old lady, Rachel, she's in depression. If you think about it, within all of our lives, it doesn't have to be that major of a deal of an accident over in Afghanistan with a Chinook helicopter or the death of your best friend on a motorcycle accident. We all go through those ups and downs each day, do we not? Maybe life is going really good, and then you look at your bills that come in the mail, and you see that your banking account is getting pretty close to the red, or maybe it is in the red. And all of a sudden that depression can come upon us. Maybe it's the fact that your kids have been raised and they're gone and they're out of the house, and you long for those days when the kids were still home. Or maybe your kids are still home and you get a little depressed. You long for the days that the kids are gone. And that goes both ways. You see, when we're faced with those situations in life, we tend to be faced with a crossroad. We can go one way or another way. For some people, they go the way of cursing God, walking away from God. Saying, God, if you were really real, none of this would have happened, and so I am leaving, I am gone, I am history, I am out of here. The other way says, God, what's going on? Can still be upset with God, can still be frustrated with Jesus, and yet clinging to, holding on tightly. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Getting ahead. I think we need to go to the first part of Psalm 77. Psalm 77 says this to us. The psalmist says, I cried out to God for help. The Hebrew word here for crying out is actually in a loud voice. God, what are you doing to me? It's crying out. It's getting that emotions. It's that deep moaning and coming out in your voice. And what's interesting is, he says it twice for emphasis. I cried out to God for help. I cried out to God, God, would you hear me? One of the things that I really miss about South Dakota, though I've been here for 13 years, I really miss not having my horse, Sundance. Had to sell him when I moved. I used to go out with Sundance, and a lot of you remember Kirby, our black lab that we had for many years. Kirby and Sundance and I would go out riding, and we would go for 5 to 10 mile rides, and I could call out to God, and I could yell at God, and I could say all sorts of things out in these fields where nobody heard me. I think if I did that on my bicycle riding down Q Avenue, nowadays people would think, who is that crazy man on a bike yelling? There's something therapeutic about getting it out. And it's also interesting here because the fact is, some people say you can't get mad at God. Don't cry out to God. Don't get frustrated with God. And I say, who better to be frustrated at? I mean, if Sue and I are having issues, if I get mad at her and say some things to her, be mean to her, it's because I know that she's going to still be there for me. Now, Rick did the prayer. Rick and I have known each other 13 years. But if I start treating Rick like that and get mad at Rick and yell at Rick, prayerfully he'll be there, but there's not that same connection. Do you understand with that? It's not the same marital connection. The psalmist says, God, I cried out to you in a loud voice. But I can do that because I know there's a relationship there and you will stand by me. And what's interesting here is in the King James and the New King James versions, there are, I think, about only 2 of all the ones that I looked at, they add after verse 1, and he gave ear to me. So the psalmist is saying, I cried out to God in this loud voice, and God, I know you will hear me. He goes on and says, when I was in distress, I sought the Lord. At night, I stretched out with untiring hands, and my soul refused to be comforted. I don't know if you're like the psalmist. I know I am like the psalmist. When do things seem most dark or dreary? And when do I feel like I'm more in the dumps? It's at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep. And everything's going through my mind. And I've taken, and some of you might think I'm crazy, 2 or 3 Tylenol PMs, and it's just not working. And I've done everything I can, but my mind just keeps going. And it's in that distress at night where we feel that pain. You wake up in the morning, finally, if you've slept, and if it's a sunny day, it's a brand new day. It's a new opportunity. But it's that nighttime where the psalmist is, and for myself, and maybe some of you are like that, at night when it's dark, that depression can hang heavy on us as the darkness hangs heavy. And the psalmist says, my soul refused to be comforted. My soul refused. There was nothing within me that would feel like there was any grace in my life. Some of you may look at this and say, this doesn't jive. This doesn't fit. This doesn't correlate. This doesn't connect with what I've been taught before. You see, we have many people today, many well-meaning Christians who say, if you are a Christian, if you've given your life to Jesus Christ, you should never be depressed. Yeah, a little chuckle, those of you that understand what I'm saying. Yeah, there's some people that say that you never should feel the down and be in the dumps. The reality is, aren't we human? The reality is we all have struggles. The reality is, if I got up here this morning and said, if you were truly a strong Christian, you would never be depressed, what would you feel like when you got depressed? You'd feel worse. You feel worse because you say, well, I must really not have enough faith, and I must not be a strong enough Christian, and then that leads you down a different path of where you don't want to go. The truth of the matter is, we all at times struggle, and that's okay. But the question is, when we come to that fork, which way do we turn? The psalmist says, my soul refused to be comforted. I remembered you, O God, and I groaned. I mused, and my spirit grew faint. You kept my eyes from closing. I was too troubled to speak. The psalmist is up all night. He can't quiet his heart